Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Inverclyde Live-Stream. It is 2 o'clock. But first, a little music. Enjoy.
There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. Sugar cane from Jamaica, put a sweet tooth in every mouth, and the cotton that once was spun here fine was gathered by black hands of the South. Factory girls, topped with scarves, made the sugar, spun the bread, and the tough men who made the great ships great were proud to call themselves red. There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. Raw tobacco from Virginia, wandered next to ruby wine, moved by dirty puffing steam trains to factories of the line. Good old ropes from Port Glasgow, copper barrels for the whiskey trade. All the world knew that the legend claimed the best ships were always Clyde made. There once was a good time when we built all the great ships here. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear. But that once time is our lost time now. That is our yesteryear.
Good afternoon. I hope you're all well and cosy. It's a lovely day outside. Dry, sunny, little nippy but not too bad. So, welcome to the live stream. Now, in case anyone is new to viewing on YouTube, this channel, The Pensioner's Ark, has a number of pre-recorded videos that you are able to view at your leisure, and you will find in each of these videos some details of various policies that the party has put together, which collectively would, in our opinion, make life so much better for not just the people of Inverclyde, but for the people of the whole of Scotland and indeed the whole of Great Britain. So bear that in mind if you're new to YouTube, that you can go and view these pre-recorded videos at your leisure. Now, one of the things that is quite obvious to anyone who lives in this town of Greenock, and that is because of the way the American style mall is located, where it's located, it splits the town in two, leaving one half of the town isolated from the other half of the town. And to me, this was such a poor choice for having an American style mall in the town. It should have, in my view, have been located on the other side of Drimple Street, but we're stuck with it now. And one of the many problems that this mall has brought is there is no central place for people of the town to gather and meet one another socially, have a blether, meet up with friends, when it's nice, of course. There is nowhere outside the people can gather. There used to be, of course, if you're old enough you will remember, there was a very nice area right opposite the town hall, but of course that's all gone now. And everyone I speak to when I'm out and about bemoans this loss and misses it dreadfully. Now, the people this affects most of all is not just the people in tenement buildings, because every tenement building has at least a drying area behind the building, but for the people who live in the high flats. When it's nice, apart from Royal Court, people in Coblane Court, for example, have nowhere to go because they are stuck right in the centre of the town, as you well know, surrounded by roads and the terminus, the bus terminus at Coblane Street. Royal Court is something of an exception, but Regent Court is exactly the same. It's surrounded by roads. So the people who live in Regent Street have nowhere to go if they want to enjoy a bit of sunshine. Now, you could argue that the Well Park isn't far from there, and that is actually true. But if you haven't been near the Well Park lately, it is a very sad and sorry sight indeed. It is not kept to the level that it once was. In fact, there is rarely children to be seen playing in that area anymore. And something needs to be done by the local council to provide some central area where people can gather and socialise and enjoy a bit of the weather when it is good, especially for the folks who are in the high-rise buildings. Now, this is a long-standing sore point with me personally, because I have lived in a high flat, and I know how frustrating it can be when the weather is nice and there is nowhere to go to sit close at hand, convenient. And this is one of the things that I would be taking up should I be elected to the council, is providing some central area where older people and younger people can gather and mix and socialise when we get a bit of decent sunshine and a bit of hot weather, which of course is not very often, as we know. So I wanted to start with that because I've been meaning to say it for long enough, that this is a real social point that needs to be addressed, and addressed very soon. I mean, these high flats went up when, in the late 1950s, early 60s. And it's much the same in Port Glasgow as well. And Gourock. I mean, you think about the one in Gourock, it's not quite so bad. It is standing opposite the Darach Park. Port Glasgow's not so as fortunate. What is it, 3 of them or 2 of them up there. Kilblain Court is definitely, and Regent Court are the worst 2 affected by this problem. And so when I've been out and about canvassing, speaking to people, giving out flyers like this one here that you see, this is something that they constantly talk about, because where do I meet them? Well, I meet them sitting in the mall. Well, sitting in the mall is not exactly sitting outside enjoying fresh air and a bit of sun. And you know how few benches there are in the mall. And now with I'm not exaggerating, as you know, when I say at least 50% of that mall is empty of shops. The shops are empty. So there is no passerbys really, unless you're heading home to that end of the town. I think this is just socially unacceptable. Because the older you get, the more you feel isolated. Especially if you're living in a high flat, because they too are not very good for encouraging neighbourly conversations. People tend to keep themselves to themselves in these high flats. No, I'm not saying that they shouldn't keep themselves to themselves. What I'm saying is there is no natural way of coming together to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And the older you become, the more important such little things become. Even if you've got children and grandchildren, that's all very well. But quite often they're at school, or their mums and dads are working. I'm being informed, of course, that there is 3 high flats in Port Glasgow. Now, if you take that at 3, I'm not quite sure if they're 12-storey or 14-storey. That's a lot of people who are too often stuck inside when the weather is good, when a lot of them, I expect, would much rather be sitting somewhere talking to friends and hopefully neighbours and getting to know one another, making connections that will last. Now, I know there is a project going in Port Glasgow, and it's run out of 7.5 John Wood Street, called Brew Buddies, where people can pop in, get a cup of tea, a sticky bun and a blether, and that's great. But the problem there is because of funding. It can't expand because of the lack of funding, and that comes directly from the council. Now, in my view, that should be greatly enhanced, spread to Greenock and Gourock, because Gourock is just as isolated because of buildings that have been torn down and empty lots. There is no real thought given to the social side of living in this area. Everything has been turned over. Well, not everything, that's an exaggeration, but too many large areas of the town have been set aside for car parks. And I know the reason for that is because it's simple to do. You just tear down whatever is there, flatten it, cover it in tarmac, and you have a car park. But the people who come into the town centre are coming in for shopping. They come in, they do their shopping, and then they go home to one of the various outlying estates, you know, such as Braeside or Larkfield or Grieve Road. And even although Grieve Road has a large green area, there is no central point for people to gather, because the community hall that's up there has been closed for over 3 years, waiting repairs. That's unacceptable. And I'm told by the local people, or at least some of the local people, that it was a community centre that was well used, like the one that's out in Larkfield. It is always in use. The one in Port Glasgow is constantly in use. But there is no central point in Greenock or Gourock where people can socialise. This has to change. And the only way I see it changing is if the voters, i.e. yourself, vote other people in, because the people who have been in for years and years and years have done nothing to address these problems. And it's one of the main things, well, not one of the main things, but it is one of the things that I would be taking up if I were elected to the council, is we need to have areas where people can collectivise, sit together and just blether away the hours the way they used to do. Now, this is not an old-fashioned idea, it's an idea that goes on all the time elsewhere. It's the same as the present site of the Academy School, which has been lying vacant for over 10 years. And nothing has been done with it. Now, that could easily be turned into some kind of social area. It's big enough to have an indoors place as well as an outdoor space. But apparently, I am told, and I cannot prove this, but I am told that the local Labour Party are the people who are blocking any kind of development taking place on that site. Now, that's a disgrace. It is a huge tract of land. And yet there it sits, grass growing wildly all over the place, and nothing happening, and no plans for anything to happen. And the last thing it needs is another set of flats being built on it. I personally think the great missed opportunity is what is about to happen on West Stewart Street and where the old BBC cinema site is. If you've been past that area recently, you'll realise the building's gone. It's almost finished its demolition. But that's earmarked for flats. That site should have been using the existing building as it was, should have been turned into a community place where people could drop in for a cup of tea and a sticky bun at a low cost, and made into a place for people to gather and meet, because it was and is completely central, whether you've got a car or not. As you all know, it's well, less than 5-minute walk from Kilblain Street. But no, we have paid a fortune to buy it back, to demolish it. And I dare say somewhere along the line it's going to be sold off to some private individual to build flats on it. I know it's earmarked for flats. And it's such a tragedy. Port Glasgow's the same. The school that was demolished up there on the high part of Port Glasgow, it's got more flats on it. And yet they keep telling us that we've got a population decline here. Since I'm saying, unfortunately, the money to repair the town hall has been repurposed to make all the toilets gender neutral. Which leads me into the other scandal, not just for Inverclyde, but for Scotland as a whole. And that is the sexualisation of children in schools. Now this is completely driven by the SNP. Completely. You can criticise the Labour Party all you like when they were in power for many, many years, too many years in fact. But since the SNP have gained power, they have done nothing but push the sexualisation of children, school children. Now I was speaking to a grandmother just on Friday there, and she was telling me that the nursery her grandchild used to go to, and you notice I say used to go, doesn't go there anymore, because they discovered quite by chance that the wee one was being told by those who run this nursery that if they didn't want to be a boy or a girl, they could be a nit. But they weren't to tell their mum and dad. And of course, parents are not allowed to criticise this. So what was the result? Well, that wee one was pulled out of that nursery. And I can assure you, it's not the only one I've heard of. Sensum is saying, didn't you realise that's how business is done? We public pick up the tab for the heavy lifting on a project, and once it's done, it gets sold to privateers who then charge us double for the privilege. So in other words, what Sensum's saying here in relationship to the BBC, the BB cinema site is quite correct. That'll be turned into flats, but we have bought it and it'll be sold off cheap. And then it'll be taken into some private pocket who will charge an enormous sum for the privilege of living in a rabbit warren of a house, because that's what it will be. It will be as many flats as they can squeeze into that site. These kind of practices, ladies and gentlemen, has to stop. They have to stop. We're paying for all of this. Never forget that. It comes out of the council tax that we all have to pay. And I think it's totally unacceptable, totally outrageous. But nothing can change unless we change who has control of the council. Now, in my ward, which is Ward 4, we have 2 SNP candidates, 2 Labour candidates, a Tory candidate, a Lib Dem candidate, and 1 independent, and myself, a candidate of the Pensioners Party. And every ward has independents standing. So if you really do care about the town, and it is our town, never forget that. It doesn't belong to the people who sit on the council. It doesn't belong to the SNP. The town is our town. It was made by us and our parents, grandparents and great-grandparents all the way back. They made this town and they paid for it. And if you care about it, as I do, the only way to get any change is to get these party hacks out. Never forget every SNP, Labour or Tory person you put in. They take their orders from above. That doesn't happen in the Pensioners Party. It doesn't work that way. We have principles that we stick to. I'll tell you one right away. In all local elections, any party member who wishes to stand has to stand in the ward that they live in. That's not true for the Conservative Party. It's not true for Labour or the SNP. They pick and choose, but they don't necessarily live in the ward that they're standing in. So you tell me how they can properly represent that ward, because they can't, in my view. Only by living in the area do you understand the day-to-day ups and downs of the area and the little niggles and things that get people annoyed and disrupts their harmony of life. It's like this brown bin collection that I keep talking about. Now that doesn't affect people who live in a high flat, but people who are paying this It's almost £30 now, and it will go up, of course. They are people who do have a little bit of a garden. So they're paying more in the way of tax than the people who live in a high flat. But conversely, if you live in a high flat, you've nowhere to sit when the weather's nice, if you're in Kilblain Court or Regent Court or Prospect Hill Court. And not everyone is fit enough to walk to the nearest place where they could sit. You have to bear that in mind as well. And there are not too many people, I would say under 30, living in a high flat. And of course, the older you get, the more or the less able you are to walk great distances. And that's why these things are important. They're not seen by the professional politician as being important, but they are, and immensely important. It's all about quality of life. And councils, every council in the land, should be balancing their decisions on the quality of life. How does this affect the quality of life for people in this area? But they don't seem to do that here. They just don't. They take the easy option all the time. All the time. Now, the brown bin collection is a sore point with anyone with a bit of garden, because it's forcing people to, once they've cut their grass or their privet hedge or whatever, what do they do with the rubbish if they can't afford the £32? Now, you might argue, oh, but it's only £32. But for too many people, £32 is a lot of money. So what do they do? Now, I don't know what they do, but I suspect what they do is they put it in a black plastic bag, tie it up and put it in their grey bin. And that's unacceptable. Because any way you cut it, it means that there's a brown bin not being used, which again we paid for. That should be scrapped. That's a tax. Nothing more, nothing less than a tax. And they will continually put it up. We know this. But these increases always happen after elections, after you've cast your vote. That's why they have postponed a decision on the cycle lanes. And they're doing that, in my view, because they want to keep these cycle lanes. They want to make it permanent and then expand it. Especially the SNP. They were the ones that first started this talk about cycle lanes, the need for it, and yet there isn't. I've asked professional cyclists. When I say professional, I mean people who take the sport of cycling seriously. They're no use, these cycle lanes, for serious cyclists. They need the open road. That's why you don't see them in the town. They're running up and down, usually from Greenock to Largs in that direction, or in the other direction, up as far as Bishopton and back. They need those open roads to practice their manoeuvres. and build up their stamina and speed. Cycle lanes is a European idea, especially in countries that are rather flat. And even if you haven't been there yourself, you know that to be true. You will have seen it in movies and documentaries on the telly. But those places were built like that to accommodate those things. You don't build a town and then add on a cycle lane after you've built the roads and pavements. It doesn't work like that. You end up with what we've now got, which is traffic chaos at the busiest times. People going to work, people coming home from work. Again, if I were to be elected, I would be one of the people who would be voting to take these cycle lanes out and prevent any extensions. The casual cyclist is usually young people, mainly young men, teenagers, and they don't even behave the way they're supposed to behave as part of the traffic flow. When they hit a red light, they just go off the cycle and walk across as though they're pedestrians. And that causes even more confusion. But as I say, you cannot get common sense solutions to problems unless you vote people in who use their common sense and don't listen to their party hacks from Edinburgh and the like, who are being pushed along a particular dogmatic line that may not even be suitable and rarely is ever suitable for local problems. Now, I could go on for the rest of the live stream here, bringing up past mistakes. But we can't change those past mistakes, unfortunately. But what we can do, with your help, is we can limit or eradicate further mistakes and try and get a balance between what we think is necessary and what we think is actually required by the people. And people in the central part of the town area all complain about this. There's nowhere central they can go and sit when the weather is nice. So to me, that's an important local issue that needs to be addressed somehow. Now, simply because the academy is out here in the west end of the town doesn't mean that there isn't a requirement for a localised gathering point. They may well be. One would have to do a proper survey to see what the people who are nearer that site would like to see there. The last thing, again, we need is another care home being put up on that site. But that's my view. Every time there is a sizable piece of land becoming vacant that belongs to the town, this is what seems to happen. We end up with care homes. And again, they're not even built with consideration to the people who are going to live in it? I ask you this question. Whenever it is nice, whenever the weather it permits people to sit outside, how many people do you see sitting outside the care homes? There's a care home right down on the Esplanade with a beautiful view over the river and across the river. And any time the weather permits sitting outside, I have yet to see anyone sitting out at that care home. To me, that's criminal. Those old folk would be better off, the ones that are able, of course, to sit outside with a cup of tea and enjoy fresh air and the view and watch the people go by. But I've never ever seen anyone sit outside of that care home in particular. But likewise, the ones in Port Glasgow, you never see anyone outside there, ever. Because they're all built to accommodate as many people as possible. The idea, the very notion that it should be a comfortable place inside and out doesn't exist, folks. The only one that I know of that's an exception to that rule is Merino Court, where my own mother was. And the people who run that place had the old folk out when the weather permitted. As for the rest, I've yet to see anyone sit outside on a decent day. These attitudes need to be changed, and that's where the council can help. Like I say, this project, Brew Buddies, where you get a cup of tea and a bun and a blether, is being starved of funds. And there's a desperate need for it. A desperate need. And the only way that that can be satisfied is by having people on the council with different attitudes who actually care about the town. And I would be one of those people if I were being elected, because I do care about the town. Because I live here. And I want it to be a place that others outside of Inverclyde will say to themselves, wow, wish I lived there, look what they've got. That's what we should be striving for. Community life needs to be relit, revitalised. And as I say, the only way I can see this even having a chance to happen is by getting rid of the people who have been in that council far too long and have done next to nothing. They've always taken the easy, simple route. When you consider I consider the enormous waste of land on Dalrymple Street given over to Tesco. It's criminal, and the same as the one up in Port Glasgow. It's actually criminal what they did in Port Glasgow. The amount of land that was given over to that one company, so that that one company could control who would come to the town, which businesses would come here and which wouldn't. Completely destroyed Port Glasgow, in my view, architecturally and socially. And these are local decisions. None of these councillors can point the finger back to Edinburgh for these decisions. They can't. These decisions were taken locally. Sensum is saying, yes, John, and that is the problem. Mainstream politicians at all levels, and by that he means town councils, are only interested in projects which reward them either financially or allows them to virtue signal on social media. In other words, folks, if you're not acquainted with that term, what he means is, oh, look at me, how good am I? Look what we did. No, oh, look at what we did for the people of Greenock, Port Glasgow, or Gourock, or Inverclyde, or even Weems Bay for that matter. And that's just the bare truth of it. I'm not picking on anybody personally. I don't believe in that kind of politics, name calling and picking on individuals, unless that individual is entirely responsible, but rarely that happens at any level. They hide behind this collectivization of decisions where we all decided. Well, that's never the case. It's always a majority, and that's where the mainstream parties come in. But there is enough individuals standing in every ward here, including my own Ward 4. There is an independent standing. As a pensioners party, excuse me, we're independent. I'm independent because not only am I the founder of the party, I am the leader, but we have policies. And more importantly, we have principles. I would say that we're the only party in this election with any principles. I'm sure the independents have their own principles. At least I would like to think that. I don't know, because I don't know them, not yet. And that's why things happen in the town that seem bizarre and odd. I mean, all the money that was spent on those, as we now call them, the tin men, I have learned that came from Edinburgh. Money is made available for art projects and you cannot use them for anything else. That's a dictate straight from Edinburgh. That's the SNP. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, our money, on that one project. But every other art project that has happened in the town or the area of Inverclyde, that's how it's done. It's cut up by Edinburgh into art projects, and you can't use that money for anything else. And yet there is so much more needing done, much more important things needing done than art projects. Now, I'm not coming down on art. I'm all for art. But you've got to look after the people's needs first before they can even enjoy any kind of art. And that's just my view on it. And the idea of so many people being isolated, socially isolated, for one reason or another, is criminal. Absolutely criminal. Ask yourself this, if you're not too old, ask yourself, what's the point of living to 70 if you're going to be living alone and isolated from other folk? What is the point of it? Where's the joy? How many of these, well, as I said, 14 stories, 6 people, 6 families, or let's say 6 households on every flat. How many people are that? And how many are isolated? Even if they have children and grandchildren, as I say, most of those parents will be at work because, as we all know, you need at least 2 salaries, and around here it's 2 part-time salaries. Low salaries at that. So that it's not as though people are being visited regularly, because they're not. And again, it's all very well to say, yes, but you've got the telephone. Sure, but it's not the same as being with another real human being. It's not. There has to be radical solutions to these social problems. Is it any wonder, on average, every year in Inverclyde, every year, 17 men commit suicide every year? Why is that? Because there's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go except pubs and social clubs, which is really just a pub. Is it any wonder they turn to drugs? And we know the area has got this awful reputation now for drug use. And if you don't believe that, you don't have to take a cab. Just ask a cab driver and they'll tell you. A lot of their trade at the weekend is driving people to fetch their drugs. We have to do something about this. I don't claim to have all the answers, because I don't. I know there's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And again, this is one of the things that I would be taking up. There is so much needing done in Inverclyde to try and fix the social problems, along with the sexualisation of children. And I'm not going to be sitting here promising that we'll bring jobs to the area. No politician can bring a job to any area. That's a myth. Employers come to an area for their own good reasons. So there's no easy solution to the unemployment. And on top of that, we've got this farce with Ferguson shipyards. The money that it's cost and the mess that it's all in. And what does Nicola Sturgeon say about it? It's not my fault, it's him. That's what the SNP do about everything. It's not our fault, it's them. And if it isn't the English getting the blame, it's him or her. And that's just not good enough. That's what she gets paid for. She's supposed to be responsible. And she does anything and everything to avoid taking responsibility. You think of the money that's been wasted buying an airport, an air. And it's losing a fortune every day, Presswick. A fortune. That all filters back down to what's available to each council. That means there's less money to go around. Less money comes to the Council of Inverclyde and every other council in Scotland. And she refuses to take any responsibility. They all do. Even at a local level, they refuse to take responsibility of this questionnaire that they secretly put out to the schools, asking under 16-year-olds about their sex life. The parents were not informed. It was done secretly. Sensum is adding here, again, and the greatest problem of all, here we go, is that none of them care, and he is absolutely correct when he says that. They don't care. They don't. They pay lip service to issues and problems and then kick them down the road to be someone else's problem. They are career politicians, and that simply means this is their job. They want to be a politician for the rest of their life and earn a lot of money for doing nothing positive for the people they're supposed to represent. He is also adding, and as we all know, the people who most crave power for their own goals are the people you least want in power. And that's absolutely correct. I would agree with that 100%. And all of you know this. I speak to enough of you on the street. You know this. So don't turn away. You don't have to turn away anymore and say, no, there's nothing we can do. There is something you can do. You can vote for the Pensioners Party. You can vote for independent candidates and get rid of these hacks and professionals. And then you will see real change. Not the day after the election, of course. These changes take time to plan properly. But changes will come if there is a will to do it. And the only way that I see forward is with parties like my own who are standing on principles and independents who I assume as individual people will have their own principles because they're not in it to climb some political ladder. Because there is, for an independent, there is no political ladder. The Pensioners Party has principles. And so long as I am the leader of the party, those principles will be held. 100%. So, I ask you, come the 5th of May, if you feel still you cannot give me your first vote, give me your second vote. Because we have that proportional voting system in Scotland, which gives people like myself the opportunity to be elected. And that's why that's one of the many reasons why we've got as many independents as we have. The SNP are hoping to double their numbers, and I'm hoping to half their numbers. Because I'm not just appealing on behalf of the Pensioners Party and myself. I'm asking you to consider other folk, independent candidates, where you are. There is only one Pensioners Party candidate, and that's myself, because we are a small party. But we will grow as we are growing. So, I'm going to finish for today because it's too nice a day and I don't want to take any more of your time up. It's rare that we get decent weather here, so I will say for now anyway, goodbye, and I'll bring on a little bit of music to see us out, and I will see you and speak to you next week at the same time, 2 o'clock, for an hour, and I'll try and contain myself to an hour. So especially when the weather's nice, you want to get out and enjoy it. So, and I do too, so enjoy the music, and thanks everyone for coming along, especially the people in the chat.
Silently the snow falls, paints a winter scene, swiftly spreads the dark rim, hides the fading autumn green. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, conjure friendships dear to me. Lightly now the breeze flows, disturbing more than just the leaves. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. Patiently the love grows, lifts the weary heart. Gently now she holds me, melts two worlds once apart. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, usher dreams of you and me. Softly then the breeze blows, disturbing more than just the trees. But love's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. Melodies of long ago, songs of innocence, harmonies to soothe the soul, have some consequence. Moonbeams brush the dark wood, awakening joys of you and me. Silently the snow falls, bringing winter symphony. But we're much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow. But life's much more than we can know. We are one small glow in the eternal flow.
Goodbye for now. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the weather.